Liam Everhart's life as a colony engineer on the remote planet HFY was a peaceful one, in spite of the occasional bout of homesickness for Earth. HFY was a lush, verdant world, covered in towering forests and meandering rivers, with fauna that reminded him of Earth, but with subtle alien differences. The massive trees had leaves that shimmered in the sunlight, with colors that shifted between gold, violet, and green. The sky itself was tinged with hues of lavender during the day and deep crimson at sunset. The air was filled with the hum of strange insects and the occasional call of the planet's many alien creatures. Liam had spent many hours exploring the region around his assigned colony, fascinated by the beauty of his new home. But nothing prepared him for what he was about to encounter. One evening, after finishing a long day of work on the colony's power systems, Liam decided to go for a hike along the cliffs overlooking the Galtara River. The river was a powerful force of nature, cutting through the dense forest with a roaring, turbulent current. It was known for being dangerous, and many colonists had warned him to stay away from the cliffs. But Liam loved the challenge and solitude of the area, so he often ventured out there alone. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the landscape, he heard something that stopped him in his tracks. A distant, desperate roar echoed up from the river below, followed by splashing and thrashing sounds that made his heart race. He hurried to the edge of the cliff, peering down into the churning waters, and what he saw sent a shock of adrenaline through his body. Below him, caught in the swirling eddies of a powerful whirlpool, was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen before. The creature was massive, at least twice the size of any terrestrial predator Liam had ever encountered. It resembled a leopard, but its body was elongated, its fur slick and gleaming with an iridescent sheen that reflected the fading sunlight in a cascade of colors. Its powerful limbs flailed against the current, its claws raking the air as it struggled to stay afloat. Its tail was long and muscular, thrashing against the water like a whip. The creature's eyes, wide with fear, glowed a fierce green as they locked onto Liam for a brief, terrifying moment. Liam knew he couldn't stand by and watch it drown. Without thinking, he dropped his pack and jacket to the ground, hastily kicking off his boots. He took one last glance down at the raging river, calculating his chances of survival. They weren't great, but the thought of letting this majestic creature die while he stood by was unthinkable. He dove off the cliff into the icy water below, the coldness of the river hitting him like a wall. The force of the current was stronger than he had anticipated, pulling him downstream immediately. His limbs were already beginning to go numb as he fought against the pull, but he had to get to the creature. With powerful strokes, he swam toward the leopard-like beast, which was now being pulled under by the whirlpool. It let out another desperate roar, its eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance as it struggled against the water. Liam reached it just as its head began to sink beneath the surface. He grabbed onto the creature's sleek fur, feeling the immense strength of its muscles as it continued to thrash. For a terrifying moment, he thought they would both be pulled under and drowned. But using every bit of strength he had, Liam pulled the creature's head above the water, struggling to keep both of them afloat in the swirling current. He managed to wrap one arm around its neck, using his other hand to paddle toward the shore. It was a grueling effort. The current fought against them, and Liam's muscles burned with exertion as he kicked and paddled, slowly making his way toward the bank. The creature seemed to sense that he was trying to help and stopped struggling as much, its body going limp in exhaustion. Still, its breathing was ragged, and Liam could feel its heart racing beneath his arm. After what felt like an eternity, Liam's feet finally touched the muddy bottom near the riverbank. With the last of his strength, he hauled both himself and the alien leopard onto the shore, collapsing next to the creature in a heap. His chest heaved as he gasped for breath, his heart pounding in his ears. The creature lay beside him, its massive chest rising and falling as it too struggled to catch its breath. For several long moments, neither of them moved. Liam lay there, staring up at the sky, which was now a deep shade of purple as night began to fall. His body ached, and he could feel the cold seeping into his bones, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins kept him from passing out. He turned his head slightly to look at the creature lying next to him. Its fur, still shimmering with an otherworldly glow, was matted and slick with water, but it appeared to be alive. Liam had saved it, but what now? He knew nothing about this species, nothing about its behavior or temperament. For all he knew, it could be dangerous, and now that it was out of the water, it might see him as a threat. But for the moment, the creature seemed content to lie there, its breathing gradually slowing as it recovered from its near-death experience. As Liam sat up, he noticed something strange. Around the creature's neck, buried beneath its thick fur, was a collar. He hadn't seen it before in the chaos of the rescue, but now it was unmistakable. The collar was made of a dark metallic material, etched with glowing symbols that pulsed faintly with light. His heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just some wild animal. It was wearing something that indicated it had an owner, or at least some kind of connection to intelligent life. What had he just saved, and who did it belong to? Liam's pulse quickened as the reality of the situation dawned on him. This was no ordinary alien predator. Whatever this creature was, it was important. And if someone had lost it, they'd come looking for it. He stood up shakily, casting a glance at the thick forest behind him. He had no idea what was out there, but he suddenly had the feeling that he wasn't alone. Chapter 2. The mysterious guardian. The adrenaline from the rescue began to wear off, leaving Liam cold, exhausted, and sore. His clothes clung to him, drenched from the freezing water, and the night air made him shiver uncontrollably. He stood there for a moment, watching the creature beside him. Its massive form was still heaving with labored breaths, but the wild terror in its glowing green eyes had faded. It blinked slowly, looking around as if regaining its bearings. The collar around its neck continued to pulse faintly with light, casting eerie shadows across the darkening landscape. Liam couldn't stop staring at it. The symbols on it were unlike anything he had ever seen. Definitely not a language from any of the known alien species that had contact with humanity. It seemed older, more archaic, and yet it was clearly advanced. Liam stepped closer, cautiously reaching out toward the collar, wondering if it was something he could remove. Before his fingers could make contact, the creature shifted, growling low in its throat. He froze, withdrawing his hand immediately. The creature's eyes flicked toward him, and for a brief, tense moment, they locked gazes. "It's okay," Liam said softly, unsure if the creature could even understand him. "I'm not going to hurt you." The growling subsided, but the creature remained alert, watching his every move with a wary intensity. Liam sighed, deciding to back off and give it space. It was clear that this alien leopard was more than it seemed. But for now, he needed to figure out what to do next. His comlink was back with his pack, which was still lying near the cliff's edge, a good distance from where they were now. He glanced at the sky again. Night had fully settled in, and the forest around them was alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. The chirping and clicking of alien insects filled the air, and in the distance, he could hear the haunting cries of other predators. Staying here on the riverbank, exposed and without weapons, wasn't an option. He had to get back to the colony or at least find shelter for the night. But as he took a step toward his pack, the creature stirred again. This time it slowly rose to its feet, towering over him. Liam held his breath. Up close, the alien leopard was even more imposing. It stood at least 6 feet tall at the shoulder, its long, muscular body rippling with power. Despite its sleek, predatory appearance, it was undeniably beautiful. Its fur, now mostly dry, shimmered with an iridescence that shifted between shades of green, blue, and silver, and those eyes, glowing with intelligence, followed his every movement. Liam hesitated. The creature was watching him so closely, as if it was waiting for something. Was it expecting him to lead the way? He swallowed hard, trying to suppress the rising tide of fear in his chest. He wasn't used to dealing with creatures of this magnitude, especially ones that seemed this intelligent. But there was something in the way the creature looked at him that felt deliberate, almost as if it understood him more than he realized. Without breaking eye contact, Liam pointed toward the forest. "I'm going that way," he said quietly. "If you want to follow, you can, but I'm not sticking around here." To his surprise, the alien leopard made no move to stop him. It merely stood there, watching as he turned and headed toward the cliffside where his pack lay. Liam's heart pounded in his chest as he made his way over to his gear, half expecting the creature to pounce on him at any moment. But it didn't, it simply watched. Once he reached his pack, Liam retrieved his comm link and checked for any nearby signals. The device beeped softly, indicating that he was just out of range of the colony's communication network. He cursed under his breath. The colony was still a good 5 kilometers away, and with nightfall the trek through the dense forest would be slow and dangerous. But he had no choice. He slung his pack over his shoulders and turned back toward the creature, which was now sitting on its haunches, still staring at him. "All right," Liam said, swallowing his nerves. "Let's go." To his amazement, the creature stood and began walking beside him as if it had understood him perfectly. It moved with a grace and elegance that belied its size, its paws making barely a sound as they padded over the soft earth. As they moved through the forest, Liam kept glancing over at it, still unsure what to make of this bizarre situation. The trek was slow going. The forest floor was uneven, with roots and undergrowth constantly tripping Liam up. Every now and then strange noises would echo through the trees, alien birds calling to one another, the distant growls of predators on the hunt. But the presence of the leopard-like creature seemed to keep most of the threats at bay. Any time a distant predator's cry became too close, the leopard would let out a low growl, and the noise would cease. As they walked, Liam couldn't help but notice that the collar around the creature's neck continued to pulse faintly. It was as if the symbols were alive, reacting to their surroundings. Occasionally, they would grow brighter, and the creature would stop, its ears twitching as if listening to something that Liam couldn't hear. After about an hour of walking, Liam began to feel the weight of exhaustion settle in. His limbs ached from the earlier swim, and the cold night air was sapping his energy. He needed to find shelter soon. The last thing he wanted was to collapse from exhaustion in the middle of the forest with an alien predator by his side. Just as he was about to suggest stopping for the night, the creature suddenly halted, its ears perking up. It let out a low, rumbling growl, its body tensing as it scanned the darkness ahead. Liam's heart raced. He strained his ears, trying to hear what had triggered the creature's alarm. But all he could hear was the usual sounds of the forest. And then he saw it. Through the trees, faintly illuminated by the glowing symbols on the leopard's collar, was a structure. It was hidden behind thick vines and overgrowth, but there was no mistaking it. This was not a natural formation. It was metallic, angular, and completely out of place in the dense wilderness. "What the hell?" Liam whispered under his breath. The leopard began to move toward the structure, and Liam, still in shock, followed. As they drew closer, the outline of the structure became clearer. It was a building, an ancient one by the looks of it, covered in moss and plant life, as though it had been abandoned for centuries. The front of the building was adorned with strange symbols, similar to those on the leopard's collar, and there was a large, circular door that appeared to be sealed shut. Liam's pulse quickened. This wasn't just some random structure. This was something significant, something ancient. And judging by the way the creature was acting, it had led him here on purpose. As they reached the door, the leopard stepped forward, pressing its head against the surface of the metal. The symbols on its collar glowed brightly, and with a soft hiss, the door began to open. Liam took a step back, his heart hammering in his chest as the door slowly revealed what lay beyond. Inside, there was a dim blue light glowing from the walls, and in the center of the room, surrounded by strange technology, was what looked like a stasis pod. Liam's breath caught in his throat as he realized what was inside the pod. A child, an alien child, no older than 5 or 6 years, sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of the world outside. He suddenly understood what the creature had been protecting all along. Chapter 3. The Hidden Legacy. Liam's mind raced as he stared at the stasis pod. Inside, the alien child lay still, suspended in a peaceful, dreamlike state. The pod was surrounded by an array of strange technology, much of which he couldn't even begin to comprehend. The walls of the structure were covered in the same glowing symbols as the leopard's collar, pulsing gently in rhythm with the device. The room itself had a serene, almost sacred quality to it. but it did nothing to calm the storm of thoughts now raging in Liam's head. The alien leopard, standing beside him, let out a soft growl, but it wasn't a warning this time. It was almost protective. Liam slowly approached the stasis pod, his eyes never leaving the child inside. The child's skin was a pale lavender, with soft features and a delicate frame. Its chest rose and fell with each steady breath, completely unaware of the years, perhaps centuries, that had passed while it slept. Liam took a deep breath, trying to make sense of everything. The creature had led him here, had protected this child, and by extension him. But why? What was this place, and why was the child kept here in stasis? More importantly, who or what was the child meant to be? He circled the pod, examining the unfamiliar symbols etched along its surface. They were intricate and alien, yet somehow they felt deliberate, purposeful. He reached out to touch the pod, his fingers brushing against the cold, smooth glass. As soon as he made contact, the symbols on the pod flashed brightly, and the soft hum of the machinery intensified. Startled, he took a step back. The leopard's growl grew louder, but this time it was directed toward the pod. It was as though the creature sensed a change in the energy of the room. Liam watched as the stasis pod began to shift, the transparent lid slowly retracting with a soft hiss. His heart raced. He had no idea what to expect. Was the child about to wake up? Was it even safe for the child to be revived after all this time? As the lid fully opened, the machinery around the pod went silent, leaving only the faint sound of the forest outside. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. The child remained motionless, its soft lavender skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Then slowly the child's eyes fluttered open. Liam held his breath. The child blinked, its large luminous eyes focusing on him with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. It didn't cry out or panic. Instead, it simply stared at Liam, as though trying to understand who or what he was. The child's gaze then shifted to the alien leopard, who had taken a step closer to the pod. The creature's posture softened, and it let out a soft rumbling purr that seemed to reassure the child. Liam swallowed, unsure of what to say or do. He knelt down beside the pod, speaking in a calm, gentle voice. "Hey, it's okay, you're safe now." The child's eyes flicked back to him, and for the first time it spoke. Its voice was soft, melodic, and completely alien, but the words were unmistakably a question. "Where am I?" Liam blinked in surprise. The child could speak, though in a language he didn't understand. He had no idea how to respond. He glanced at the leopard, as though hoping it might offer some guidance. But the creature simply sat there, watching him with those piercing green eyes. "I'm sorry," Liam said, shaking his head slightly. "I don't understand your language." The child tilted its head, seeming to ponder his words. It reached up, touching its own throat with delicate fingers, as though trying to grasp the concept of speech. Then, after a moment, it spoke again, this time in a broken, halting version of Liam's own language. "Home gone?" the child asked, its voice trembling with uncertainty. Liam's heart sank. He didn't know how to answer that. For all he knew, this child had been in stasis for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. Its home could very well be gone, wiped out by time or disaster, but he couldn't bring himself to say that. Instead, he knelt closer, his tone soft and reassuring. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'll help you. I promise." The child's eyes softened, though the confusion and fear didn't entirely fade. It sat up slowly in the pod, its small hands gripping the edges as though trying to steady itself. The leopard moved closer, nudging the child gently with its head, as though offering comfort. The child smiled faintly, resting a hand on the creature's sleek fur. Liam watched the interaction, still struggling to wrap his mind around everything. The bond between the child and the leopard was clear. They weren't just companions, they were protectors of each other. He had stumbled into something far more significant than he had realized, and now it was his responsibility to figure out what that was. His comm link beeped softly, snapping him back to reality. He quickly pulled it out of his pack, checking the signal. To his relief, he was now within range of the colony's communication network. But the relief was short-lived, as the realization of what he had discovered settled in. He couldn't just take this child, and the leopard, back to the colony without raising questions. There were too many unknowns, and he had no idea how the authorities would react to finding an ancient alien child in stasis, let alone the creature that had been guarding it. Liam's mind raced. He needed to be careful. He needed to protect them both. The child, now fully awake, looked at him again with wide, curious eyes. It pointed to itself and spoke softly. "Rilke, a name." Liam smiled gently. "Rilke, that's your name?" The child, Rilke, nodded slowly, then pointed at the leopard, adding, "Guardian." "Guardian?" Liam repeated, glancing at the creature, which was now watching him with an almost regal air. It made sense. The leopard had been guarding Rilke all this time, waiting for someone or something to come for them. But who had left them here in the first place? And why? Before Liam could ponder those questions any further, the ground beneath them rumbled slightly. He froze, his eyes darting around the room. The technology surrounding the stasis pod began to hum again, but this time it was different, more intense, more urgent. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, flickering rapidly as the room filled with a low, vibrating hum. Rilke's eyes widened in alarm, and the leopard guardian stood up, growling softly as it sensed the change in the atmosphere. Liam's heart raced. Something was happening. Something bad. "We need to go," he said quickly, grabbing his pack and motioning for Rilke to follow. The child hesitated for a moment, then nodded, slipping out of the pod and standing on unsteady legs. Guardian moved protectively beside Rilke, guiding the child toward Liam. As they hurried toward the exit, the rumbling grew louder, and the lights in the room flickered erratically. Liam glanced back over his shoulder, his mind racing with possibilities. Was the structure collapsing, or was it something worse? They burst out of the building just as a deafening roar echoed through the forest. Liam looked up, his blood turning to ice. Above them, descending from the darkened sky, were several large alien ships. They were sleek and angular, their metallic surfaces glinting in the moonlight. They hovered ominously over the treetops, their lights scanning the forest below. One of them let out a sharp, shrill sound like a warning. Rilke gasped, clutching Guardian's fur as the ships descended further. "Liam," the child said, her voice trembling, "they found me." Chapter 4. The reckoning of the past. Liam's pulse quickened as the alien ships hovered ominously above the treetops, casting long, eerie shadows across the forest. The air seemed to hum with tension, the low whine of the ships echoing through the quiet night. He gripped his pack tighter, his mind racing. Who were they, and why were they here now? More importantly, how had they found Rilke so quickly after she woke up? Rilke, still clutching Guardian's sleek fur, looked up at Liam with wide, terrified eyes. They're here for me," she whispered, her voice shaking. The child's fear was palpable, and Guardian growled low in its throat, standing protectively between Liam and the alien vessels. The creature's glowing green eyes flicked from the ships to the surrounding forest, as if anticipating a threat from all directions. Liam took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He had no idea what he was up against, but running wasn't an option. They were deep in the wilderness, miles from the nearest colony outpost, and these ships were clearly hunting for Rilke. If they didn't do something fast, there would be nowhere to hide. The largest of the alien ships lowered slightly, its sleek, metallic hull now visible through the trees. It let out a shrill, piercing noise, and a bright beam of light shot down from its underbelly, sweeping over the forest floor. Liam instinctively ducked behind a nearby tree, pulling Rilke and Guardian with him. Rilke's small body trembled, and she clutched Liam's arm, her pale lavender skin glistening faintly in the moonlight. "They're called the Kavari," she said in a shaky voice, her eyes never leaving the ships above. They took everything from my people. My parents, my home. They were the ones who put me in the stasis pod. They wanted me to stay hidden until it was safe." Liam's heart sank as the weight of her words hit him. The Kavari. He'd heard the name before, an ancient, reclusive species, notorious for their ruthless tactics and advanced technology. They had been a ghost story among traders and explorers, rarely seen but always feared. No one knew much about them, but the few records that existed painted them as conquerors who obliterated entire civilizations to maintain their empire's secrecy. And now they were here, hunting Rilke. "How did they find you?" Liam asked, his voice low but urgent. Rilke shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't know. I've been asleep for so long. My parents said the stasis pod would keep me safe. But now they're here. Liam cursed under his breath. The stasis pod must have emitted some kind of signal when it activated, alerting the Kavari to Rilke's presence. They had been waiting for this moment, watching the planet for any sign of activity related to the lost stasis pod. And now that Rilke was awake, they weren't going to leave without her. A sudden deafening crash erupted from the forest behind them. Liam turned just in time to see one of the Kavari ships land in a clearing nearby, its sleek metal hull hissing with steam. The trees around it crackled and groaned as the ship's engines scorched the earth. The air was thick with tension, and a growing sense of dread gnawed at Liam's chest. The ship's landing ramp slowly lowered with a mechanical whir, revealing a squad of tall, imposing figures clad in dark armor. Their helmets obscured their faces, but their glowing red eyes glared out menacingly from beneath their visors. They moved with a precision that sent a chill down Liam's spine, their weapons drawn and ready as they began fanning out into the forest. They're coming, Liam muttered under his breath, his mind scrambling for a plan. We have to move, Guardian snarled, the fur along its back bristling as the Kavari soldiers advanced. The massive creature shifted, positioning itself in front of Rilke protectively, its eyes locked on the approaching threat. Rilke looked up at Liam, her voice trembling with fear. They won't stop until they have me. They'll destroy everything to get what they want. Liam clenched his fists. The Kavari were relentless, and if they were willing to send this many troops after a single child, then whatever Rilke represented was far more important than he had originally thought. But he wasn't about to let her fall into their hands. He had come too far to turn back now. We're not going to let that happen, he said firmly, his eyes scanning the forest for any possible escape routes. Before he could come up with a plan, a sudden noise echoed from the ship's open ramp, a deep mechanical voice speaking in a language that was harsh and guttural. One of the Kavari soldiers stepped forward, raising a device to his helmet. A bright, pulsating light shot out from the device, sweeping over the forest like a scanner. They're tracking us, Liam muttered, his pulse quickening. The light passed over the trees, growing brighter as it moved in their direction. Liam's heart raced. There was no time to run. They were going to be found in a matter of seconds, unless they did something drastic. Suddenly, Guardian let out a low growl, turning to face Liam and Rilke. Its glowing green eyes met Liam's, and for a moment there was a strange, almost sentient understanding in its gaze. The creature's muscles tensed, and without warning it lunged forward, grabbing Rilke gently by the scruff of her collar and leaping into the trees. Guardian, no, Rilke cried out, her voice muffled as the creature whisked her away into the dense foliage. Liam blinked in surprise, momentarily stunned by the speed and grace with which the alien leopard had disappeared into the trees with the child. His instincts screamed at him to follow, but before he could take a step, the Kavari soldiers were upon him. They emerged from the forest like shadows, their red eyes glowing menacingly in the dark. Liam's heart pounded in his chest as he stood frozen, his mind racing for a way out. The lead Kavari soldier stepped forward, towering over him with an imposing presence. Its dark armor gleamed in the moonlight, and the air around it seemed to crackle with energy. Where is the child? The soldier's voice growled, its words heavily accented but intelligible. Liam's throat went dry. He glanced toward the trees where Guardian had disappeared, hoping the creature had taken Rilke far enough away to be safe. His mind whirled as he weighed his options. He could lie, try to throw the Kavari off their trail. But these weren't just soldiers, they were trackers. They could probably sense the direction the child had gone. And if they found her? I don't know what you're talking about, Liam said, trying to keep his voice steady. I was just hiking through the forest. The Kavari soldier stepped closer, its red eyes narrowing. Do not insult our intelligence, human. We know the child was awakened. The signal from the stasis pod was detected. She is the key to what we seek, Liam's mind raced. The key. What did they mean by that? There was clearly more to this than just an ancient stasis pod or a lost child. Rilke had said her parents had hidden her for a reason, but she hadn't known what that reason was. The Kavari, on the other hand, seemed to have all the answers. "I don't know where she is," Liam repeated, his voice firmer this time. "And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you." The soldier's red eyes flared with anger, and it raised its weapon, aiming it directly at Liam's chest. "Then you will die with the child's secrets." Before Liam could react, a sudden blur of motion exploded from the trees. Guardian, the alien leopard, barreled into the Kavari soldier with terrifying speed, its powerful jaws clamping down on the soldier's arm. The force of the impact sent the soldier crashing to the ground, and Guardian's growl echoed through the night as it tore through the soldier's armor with ease. Liam barely had time to process what was happening before Guardian leaped at the second soldier, its glowing green eyes ablaze with fury. The Kavari were caught off guard, their weapons firing wildly as they tried to fend off the massive creature. But Guardian was too fast, too powerful. It moved like a shadow, tearing through the soldiers with a precision that was almost supernatural. Liam didn't waste any time. He sprinted toward the trees where Rilke was hiding, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the sounds of battle behind him, Guardian's snarls, the Kavari's shouts, and the crackle of energy weapons, but he didn't look back. Rilke was crouched in the undergrowth, her wide eyes filled with terror as Liam approached. "Liam," she whispered, her voice trembling, "they won't stop. They'll keep coming."